All right, it's 7 o'clock. Let's get started. We like to start on time. Hello, welcome. We'd like to thank you for inviting the League of Women Voters of Torrance area to make this presentation for the November 2022 state ballot measures. My name is Gloria Gutierrez, and I'm the president of the local League of Women Voters of Torrance area. As many of you know, the League of Women Voters was founded over 100 years ago in 1920, the year when women first gained the right to vote. Its purpose was, and still is today, to promote an active and informed citizenry for women and men of all ages. The League has two separate and distinct roles. First, education and voter service, and second, action and advocacy. We never support or oppose a political party or candidate. We do take positions on issues, however, but only after we study them at the local and or state levels and arrive at a consensus. So this slide covers what are pros and cons, unbiased, nonpartisan explanation of state ballot measures. It helps create an understanding of the issues, the context, and the arguments for and against, so you can make an informed decision. On this measure today, on this ballot, there are 7 propositions. We're here today to describe the pros and cons of each measure, as well as some of the two county measures. Also, if you are not already a member, we'd like to invite you to join the League of Women Voters of Torrance area today, and you can do so by visiting our website or talking to our lady out there in the foyer. All right, so let's start with our first proposition.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Jackie LaBeouf. I am the education chair on the league, and I'm just going to stand up here and read what you're reading, just to make sure that we're all on the same page with the information. This is Proposition 1, which amends the Constitution to include a right to productive freedom. Should the California Constitution be amended to expressly guarantee the right to reproductive health care, freedom, including the right to choose an abortion or to choose or refuse contraception? And it's been broken down into the situation, the proposal, and the fiscal effects. The situation is that protected by law, but explicitly in the Constitution of California. And the proposal is to amend the California Constitution by adding a specific right to reproductive freedom, including abortion and contraceptives. There will be no impact on the state budget other than costs needed to place the measure on the ballot. And the supporters say that the Constitution already protects productive rights so that we don't really have a risk here in the state of California. And the Proposition 1 is an extreme, expensive, and pointless waste of tax money that will allow abortion at any time. So the issue is, do we guarantee that women have the right of their own body to make a choice, or do we not? And we want to have it, if you're approving on the Constitution, and it would be like codified, we've all heard that word, and if we aren't into that, we say no.
We do have the ability for questions from the audience. So Our newest member here will be walking around with cards. If you'd like to fill out a question, please raise your hand so that she can bring you a card, and she'll bring you a pencil as well, and you can fill it out. And then when your question is ready, go ahead and raise your hand, and she'll come back for it. If we have to go back, please reference which proposition you have a question about. So if we have to go back, we can go back to the person who knows the most.
Still off. Sorry. If anybody out there has expertise in computers, websites, all of that kind of stuff, we really, really need you. So if there's young people out there, I'm assuming they're going to be young, please think about joining us.
I'll be reviewing two propositions. My name's Deborah Dawson, and I'm a secretary for the League of Women Voters Torrance area. First proposition is Proposition 26 that, as you could see above, answer the question, should California legalize in-person sports betting, including roulette and dice games at tribal casinos? Proposition 26 is described on the November ballot as allows in-person roulette, dice games, sports wagering on tribal Indian lands in particular, and it also allows sports wagering at horse race areas. Historically, the California Constitution generally prohibited gambling, but over several years, the state constitution has been amended to allow some forms of gambling in certain locations. Currently, both the California Lottery and card rooms in which games like poker are played are legal. Betting on horse races in 17 counties is also legal. In 66 American-owned casinos in California, slot machines and certain card games are also allowed. But state law bans sports betting, roulette, and games with dice. Each tribal casino operating must negotiate a compact with the state to operate under state gambling law regulations and update their compacts whenever a state gambling law changes. So the Proposition 26 would allow in-person roulette, dice games, sports wagering on tribal Indian lands and horse race areas only, not online. Online betting is Prop 27. So let's go into Prop 26 with slide 2. Okay, that one. Yes, I'll be talking about each category here. The lack of legal sports betting does not mean that Californians engage in it. An unpublished study from 2019 estimated that Californians were making billions of dollars in sports bets, either through bookies or offshore companies. California does not prohibit fantasy league betting because it's not based on the scores of a real name, but rather involves adding up points of individual players from a fantasy scenario. American Indian tribe casinos do not pay state or local taxes, but do pay state and local governments a fee based on their casino revenue currently at a rate that is negotiated by each tribe. In many cases, portion of casino income is currently used to benefit communities by supporting education, buildings, and services. There are currently 79 tribes operating 66 casinos in California. If you vote yes on Prop 26, Prop 26 would do the following. It would legalize in-person sports betting at American casinos that already exist and the 4 licensed racetracks in California. It would not allow betting on high school sports or events involving a California college team. At racetracks, sports betting could only be offered to people 21 and older. Age restriction at betting at tribal casinos would need to be renegotiated by each tribe and written into the tribe's compact. In other words, tribes' compacts now allow 18-year-old and older to bet in some of their compacts. Prop 26 would also legalize roulette and dice games such as craps at tribal casinos. However, existing tribal state compacts would need to be updated to allow those games. Prop 26 also creates a new way of enforcing some gaming laws, allowing anyone to bring a lawsuit if they believe the gambling laws are being violated and the state justice department has declined to act. Any lawsuit penalty and settlement money that results would go to the state. In the middle here, well, actually the last section here, fiscal impacts. The fiscal impacts of Prop 26 for state and local governments are not certain, but state revenue would probably increase in the tens of millions of dollars each year. New tribal state compacts might require tribes to pay more to local governments, and it's not clear how much money will go to the state from the decisions of new private lawsuits. Any revenue to the state would first be spent on education spending commitments and regulatory costs, and then 70% of the money left over would go to the state general fund, 15% to gambling enforcement, 15% to problem gaming, and mental health research. Slide 3. Supporters of Prop 26 would continue to aid point out this would continue to aid the American Indian tribes in developing self-sufficiency. The revenue made already in the casinos is used to enhance schools, housing, public safety, and Native American community programs. Prop 26 will therefore allow in-person sports wagering at the currently regulated Indian casinos and also allow the casinos to offer additional types of games. Casinos in California currently create 150,000 jobs. Prop 26 will possibly also strengthen enforcement of California gaming laws through its new ability to allow private lawsuits over violation of gaming laws. The next slide. Opponents of Prop 26 say it's clearly an expansion of gambling that will lead to more gambling addiction. Opponents also say it's sponsored mainly by 5 wealthy gaming tribes. It's also possible that tribal agreements could use new legal enforcement provisions in Prop 26 to put existing card rooms not on the tribal lands out of business. Prop 26 will also expand access to gambling at horse race tracks, which opponents note is known to take a toll on horses' health. Finally, opponents note the jobs promoted by the tribal casinos as part of Prop 26 are non-union jobs and offer few benefits and little job security. And I think that's it. Yes, the voter's edge. You can see already for Prop 26, the total amount of money raised just to support the proposition is going to be one of the biggest money raisers or proposed for a proposal in the state of the 7 propositions that we're reviewing tonight. So you have $116 million there currently raised to support, and a lot of it is coming from 5 large tribal casinos. And the no's are a number of the smaller casinos which are concerned they will be shut out of this negotiation or they will lose revenue. So, do you have a total of, oh yeah, up there, yeah, 42 million. So 116 million to 42 million is still, okay. So that's the summary of the pros and cons on Prop 26. However, there's a companion or contrasting proposition called Proposition 27. Prop 27 is another way to legalize sports betting for those aged 21 and older in the state of California. Prop 27 was designed to legalize online sports betting outside of Indian lands, which is in direct contrast to the in-person tribal land betting. As background, remember it's already legal to play the California lottery, bet on a horse race, put wagers down in card games in certain card rooms, and gamble inside American Indian-owned casinos. Since the U.S. Supreme Court ended the federal prohibition on sports betting in 2018, about 35 states have taken gosh, I'm having a hard time tonight, sorry. About 35 states have taken steps to legalize sports betting in some form. Since the California legislature has failed to come up with legislation on sports betting, both Prop 26 and Prop 27 initiatives are being placed on the ballot to help craft what could be legal sports betting in California. So that's the situation. If passed, Prop 27 would have the following three effects. First, it would legalize mobile sports betting and dedicate some of the revenue to the California Solutions to the Homeless and Mental Health Support Account and the Tribal Economic Development Account. Second, licensed tribes or gambling companies who meet certain upfront monetary deposit criteria could offer online sports betting over the internet and mobile devices to people 21 years of age and older on non-tribal lands in California. Third, online sports betting entities would be required to pay the state a share of their online sports betting profit. As part of this new sports betting profit, a new state agency would be created to regulate online sports betting. Funding to reduce illegal online sports betting would also be available as part of the state agency's new regulations. Finally, fiscal effects. The fiscal impact of the state and local tribal county budgets, if Prop 27 passes, depends on many variables. One, the number of entities that would offer online betting after putting up $10 million buy-in fee to the state up front. The possible renegotiation of compacts between the state of California and every tribe, there's 79 tribes, and out-of-state national gaming companies, they will all have to negotiate regulations, each one, with the state of California. The number of people that ultimately engage in online betting versus other kinds of gambling is yet to be determined. There is a potential for increase in state revenues from online sports gambling ranging from $100 million up to $500 million each year. Some or all of the new state regulatory costs would be offset by the payments sports betting operators must pay to the state for regulation and upfront minimum fees. The third slide, supporters. Supporters of Prop 27 note the many potential positive fiscal effects of legalizing online sports betting. Positive fiscal effects include providing hundreds of millions of dollars to support programs that alleviate homelessness, mental health, and addiction in California. Already, online betting is happening in California through illegal offshore operators. Supporters of Prop 27 believe online gambling should be legal in California, as it is in most other states. And Prop 27 would also give those larger California tribes who can afford the upfront $10 million depository fee even more revenue for their tribes in the long run. The last slide, opponents. Opponents say that it is being promoted mostly by the out-of-state online gambling industry companies and will generate billions of dollars for those companies, most of which will leave the state. Since Prop 27 will cost any gambling entity a $10 million upfront fee to become a registered California online betting organization, Prop 27 makes it almost impossible for smaller gaming companies or smaller tribal organizations to compete in the new gaming online marketplace. The final slide, I believe, or wait, yes. Ultimately, many tribes with smaller casinos or smaller card rooms are concerned they're going to see decreases in their in-person clientele due to online gambling. Smaller gaming organizations therefore fear job cuts and a loss in revenues if Prop 27 passes. Opponents to Prop 27 also note, since a person could make a bet from any mobile device, it will make gambling much easier and add to gambling addiction community cost. In addition, it will be likely more difficult to impose the 21-year-old age limit on those placing online bets, as opposed to Prop 26, where you are monitoring people in person in casinos. And you could look up and see there, in comparison to the last slide we showed you on finances, there's almost as much raised for Prop 27 as the last one, Prop 26. But there's a huge amount of money coming from a lot of smaller groups raised as a no on Prop 27. But also a number of these organizations that are against Prop 27 are concerned about mental health, homelessness groups. Several political parties are listed in here. So the no amount of money listed is quite a diverse group and is almost double what was put up to argue the proposal for Prop 26. Yeah, there's many smaller tribes, as I said, that are afraid because of the $10 million upfront fee and a new compact they would have to negotiate, that this would be very hard for them to buy in. And the $10 million upfront fee is just the first fee. They have to keep paying $1 million every 5 years if they're a certain small amount. The online gaming companies from out of state have to pay a $100 million buy-in fee, but they don't seem to be afraid of doing that. So that's what you see in this final Prop 27, and in terms of money, is a much bigger debate. Thank you.
While I have the time, I will go ahead and answer the two questions that I received for Prop 1. The first one, does Prop 1 provide abortions at any time, no matter how late in the term? And the second one is there any restriction on heartbeat of fetus or timing? And what it says in this book that I received from the Secretary of State of California, I've seen a couple of people having it in your hands now. What the answer to your questions is that, where'd it go? Well, I had it. It says that this Proposition 1 has no limit on late-term abortions. Like other Constitution amendments, it will have numerous lawsuits in court challenges, leaving the fate and the subject up to judicial interpretation. So that's what they're leaving it up to the individual woman to make the decision.
You want me to go ahead and take the Prop 26 question. First, the ads, and yes, there are many ads on TV, state that most of the dollars will be going to the 5 big casinos. Is this true? The 5 big casinos are definitely the ones who have put forth most of the money advertising the passage of Prop 26. The card rooms that I mentioned earlier when I talked about all the different gambling that is allowed already in person in the state of California, they are concerned that the big casinos will be offering a smorgasbord of betting while the card rooms will still be limited to poker. And they're afraid that a lot of the money a lot of the clientele will end up going to the 5 big casinos that will be able to implement their compacts with the state pretty quickly, and that they will shut out the smaller casinos, and also they will shut out and take away the clientele of the card rooms. And the card rooms in the state of California that are playing poker are often in lower income communities of color and scattered in the urban areas of the state, while a lot of the casinos and horse tracks are located more in the rural areas of the state. If you look at the official voter guide to California, it shows you a map of where the casinos and horse tracks are located, and you can see, in a glance where most of the money is likely to be going. But yes, the 5 biggest casinos probably are going to implement this the fastest if Prop 26 is passed. And Prop 27? How is the age 21 plus to be monitored by whom? That is the question that the opponents to Prop 27 are most concerned about, and that many of the social groups and political groups in California are the reason there's 230 million saying no to raised to say no to Prop 27 is that they are there's a diverse group that is afraid that there is no good monitoring of online gambling by age. So that will be what each online gaming company, whether they come in from out of state or they're the tribal companies doing online gaming under a new compact. The tribal companies already have 18-year-olds in the casinos. So the concern with the casinos is, for Prop 27, is how are you going to divide your 18-year-olds and your workers away from the age limit of 21-year-old for sports betting when you already have younger bettors in the casino under current Indian compacts. So yes, they age plus under online betting and under in-person betting, both. The limit of sports betting to age 21 plus potentially is a problem for both Prop 26 and Prop 27. But most people believe it's more of a problem for online sports betting to regulate.
Hi, I'm Sharon Alexander, and I'll be covering Proposition 28, which provides additional funding for arts and music education in all kindergarten through grade 12 public schools, including charter schools. The question in this proposition is, should the state provide specific funding for arts and music education in public schools, an amount higher than the existing constitutional minimum amount that's required already for public education? Little background on this, California's public schools currently have about 6 million students from kindergarten through grade 12, and roughly 6% of those public school students are, 60% are from low-income families. So the California Constitution already requires the state to set aside a minimum amount of state general fund and local property tax revenue each year for public schools and community colleges. 40% of the general fund revenue is used to meet this requirement. The state's current budget includes $110 billion to meet this requirement. State law encourages schools to provide instruction in visual and performing arts, including music, to all students in grades 1 through 6. But they run out of money in these schools. In the high schools, students are required to take 1 year of visual and performing arts towards their graduation. Because Proposition 98 passed in 1988, every year, as I said, the state must set aside about 40% of its income to fund public schools. But when the budget gets tight, it turns out to be the arts programs that get cut. And the state doesn't have another annual source of funding for arts and music education in public schools. So there's currently no guaranteed source of annual funding in the state budget for these arts and music education programs. Proposition 28 would require the state to set aside a portion of the state's general fund to pay for arts and music education. This funding would be in addition to that 40% funding already guaranteed by Proposition 98. So Proposition 28 would allocate more funding to schools serving many low-income students. Schools would be required to report how funding was used to directly benefit students, and larger schools would be required to spend 80% of the funding they're given to employ new staff and 20% on training and supplies. So what this bill would do is generate an amount equal to 1% of the general funding that would go specifically to the arts. And it would allocate a greater proportion of these additional funds to schools serving more economically disadvantaged students. Schools with 500 or more students have to spend that 80% of their funding on teachers and the rest on supplies. And there would be audits and limits to that 1% of funding. So fiscally, increased state costs of about $1 billion is estimated to go into this program beginning next year for arts education in public schools. This amount is less than 0.5% of the state's total general fund budget. The additional funding would be considered a payment above the constitutionally required amount of funding, that 40% that I mentioned before, for public schools and community colleges. We can go on to supporters. Supporters say Arts and music education can improve a student's personal and academic life. It's critical it plays a critical role in helping children learn, develop, and achieve in school and later in life. With arts and music education, students do better in math, reading, and other subjects. They learn to think creatively and critically, and they have better attendance, self-confidence, and mental health. At this point, only 1 in 5 schools have a dedicated teacher for arts and music programs. This bill will ensure access to arts and music education. It protects existing education funding. It includes strict accountability and transparency, and parents, teachers, and children support it. As I said, it would be given more to low-income communities that need more funding. And it includes traditional arts and music classes like theater, dance, band, painting, and drawing, and also for contemporary arts like graphic design, computer graphics, and film and video, which we might not have thought about when we're thinking of funding the arts. This proposition has safeguards, so it prohibits the legislature or school districts from using the funds for other purposes, requires, as I said, annual audits, and requires the school to publish annual reports about how they've used this money. It helps prepare students for good jobs in the California economy, and it improves mental health and social development. The opponents say Proposition 28 would limit the state funds from being available to other kinds of spending. So, who are the proponents? The proponents are primarily educators, actors, musicians, labor groups, the California Democratic Party, Californians for Arts and Music in Public Schools, California Teachers Association. The opponents are listed as San Diego Union Tribune Editorial Board, and that's all I've got. Now, contributions, so who's giving the money? Almost $11 million has been raised to support this measure. The top contributors turn out to be the Californians for Arts and Music in Public Schools, California Teachers Association, Stephen A. Ballmer and affiliated entities, Fender Music Instruments Corporation, and Monica Rosenthal, followed by a number of other organizations and individuals funding 100 or 200,000. Opponents, whoops, just skipped right through. What the heck happened? Hold on, I don't want to tell you about 31 first. Yeah, no, it just skipped through the... There's been no significant funding raised against this bill, but opponents say that with upcoming recession, the state will be scrambling for money for other needs because it will have been locked into funding this area of education. So, in summary, arts and music education plays a critical role in helping children learn, develop, and achieve in schools and later in life. But in California, public schools, arts and music programs have often been the first to get cut. Proposition 28 provides additional assured funding for arts and music education without raising taxes. 80% of those monies would go into hiring teachers. Charter schools are included under this bill. Applied arts like graphic design and computer studies would be included. And California presently has a budget surplus of $100 billion, so at present, passage of this proposition would require no state budget cuts. So in summary, a yes vote means the state would provide additional funding specifically for arts education in public schools. The amount would be above the constitutionally required amount of funding for public schools and community colleges. And a no vote means funding for arts education in public schools would continue to depend on state and local budget decisions. Thank you. Okay, the question that came to me is, where will the money come to cover this? No additional property tax is anticipated. However, money doesn't come from no place, so if they take it from the state budget, right now they got a surplus, but if we get into trouble, then they're going to have to take it from someplace else.
I'm presenting on Proposition 29, and it requires on-site licensed medical professionals at kidney dialysis clinics. And what you'll read on your ballot says, should outpatient dialysis, clinics be required to have a physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant on site at all hours when patients are being treated. And the situation is that dialysis is usually provided by licensed dialysis clinics. A patient's personal doctor must visit them once a month during the treatment. The proposal is that the required dialysis clinics to have at least one doctor, nurse, practitioner, or physician assistants present during the patient treatments. And the cost could be in low tens of millions of dollars. The supporters say dialysis is a dangerous procedure. Clinics should always have a healthcare provider available to help. Opponents say that Prop 29 would take healthcare providers away from hospitals and emergency rooms. So one of the issues that comes up is why? Why do they want to make changes now? And the people that are in favor of it usually are patients, and they already require their physician to be present at least once a month. There are many multinational for-profit corporations who manage 3/4 of the clinics, and there are only 2 clinics in 3/4 of the California. Davita Incorporated and Fresenius Medical Care. And they feel very strongly that there will be an increase in cost for at least 80,000 patients. And they do not worry that there's might not be any improvement. So the yes people say that people who are on dialysis are prone to infection, and therefore they need the physicians. And the product is hard for continuous, and it prohibits discrimination because of the lack of insurance. And the increased transparency protect patients. But the patients themselves are the ones that seem to be very concerned about some of the changes that could take place if this proposition goes through.
I'm going to be speaking to Prop 30. Prop 30 is an initiative statute, which means that it was put on the ballot by petition signatures. The question being asked of the voter is, should the tax rate on personal income above $2 million be increased by 1.75% and the revenue dedicated to zero-emission vehicle subsidies, zero-emission vehicle infrastructure, such as electric vehicle charging stations, and wildfire suppression and prevention programs? In response to climate change, California has implemented a number of programs to promote zero-emission vehicles, called ZEVs. Zero-emission vehicles include electric and hydrogen-fueled vehicles, as well as any other vehicle that earns compliance credits for zero-emissions operations by the state board. One of the programs includes requiring ride-sharing companies such as Uber and Lyft to have 90% of their drivers drive ZEVs by 2030. In addition to the high cost of ZEVs, the state's electrical grid requires upgrades in order to handle the increased capacity that additional ZEVs would require. The state currently has approximately $10 billion allocated over 5 years for increasing the number of ZEVs in the state. Additionally, in late August, the California Air Resources Board approved a rule to phase out traditional gas-powered cars. Per Cal Matters, automakers will have to gradually electrify their fleet of new vehicles, beginning with 35% of 2026 models sold, increasing to 68% in 2030, and 100% for 2035 models. As of this year, about 16% of all new car sales in California are zero-emission vehicles, twice the share in 2020. State agencies are responsible for wildfire suppression and prevention on about 1/3 of state land. Federal and local agencies are responsible for the rest. The state budget for wildfires this year is approximately $4 billion. Last year, California raised more than $130 billion in revenue from personal income taxes, and California currently has a budget surplus of $97 billion. So that is the situation. State collects taxes on income made in California. In 2020, the state collected over $130 billion in income taxes. So what the prop says. The Prop 30 would increase the income tax rate by 1.75% on individual incomes above $2 million from 12.3% to 15.05% for each dollar over $2 million. These funds, net of expenses, would be allocated as follows. 45% of funds would promote the purchase of ZEVs, including subsidies and rebates for passenger vehicles, such as cars, and medium and heavy-duty vehicles like trucks and buses. 35% of funds would increase the availability of ZEV infrastructure, including electric charging stations close to single and multifamily dwellings, and 20% would help fund wildfire suppression and prevention. Prop 30 stipulates that at least half of the funds allocated for ZEVs and ZEV charging must primarily benefit low-income and disadvantaged communities. It also requires that CAL FIRE make hiring and training additional firefighters a top priority for its funds. The tax increase would end on January 1st, 2043, or earlier if there are 3 consecutive calendar years in which statewide greenhouse gas emissions are 80% below 1990 levels. So fiscal effects. Prop 30 would generate $3.5 to $5 billion in revenue in most years, increasing over time. That would amount to $2.8 to $4 billion annually in ZEV funding and $700 million to $1 billion annually for wildfire response. The measure could help decrease state and local costs for wildfire suppression and prevention, though the size of the fiscal effects is difficult to predict. So what supporters say? Existing programs are insufficient to address California's poor air quality, which is largely caused by automobile exhaust and wildfire smoke. Prop 30 would make electric vehicles more affordable and would create well-paying green jobs. Prop 30 would fund critically needed programs to prevent catastrophic wildfires and protect homes, and strict accountability would ensure that these funds are spent as intended. You'll also see on the slide it says greenhouse gas emissions from cars and other transportation are the largest contributors to climate change, although wildfires are up there too. Those who support: California State Firefighters, American Lung Association, Coalition for Clean Air, California Environmental Voters, which is one of the top 10 contributors, Natural Resources Defense Council, and Union of Concerned Scientists. What opponents say? They say California is already spending more than $50 billion for a multi-year climate investment, including $10 billion for ZEVs. There's no guarantee that Prop 30 will make ZEVs more affordable for most California families. Prop 30 locks money away from income taxes, normally a major source of school funding, into special interests. Prop 30 is Lyft's attempt to get taxpayers to help foot the bill for the requirement to increase the number of ZEVs used. Who opposes? Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, California Small Business Association, United Latinos Action, California Teachers Association, Jack O'Connell, State Superintendent of Public Instruction, retired, Governor Gavin Newsom, and the Republican Party of California. So a yes vote means taxpayers would pay an additional tax of 1.75% on personal income above $2 million annually. The revenue collected from this additional tax would support zero-emission vehicle programs and wildfire response and prevention activities. And a no vote means no change would be made to taxes on personal income above $2 million annually. For additional information about taxes, the current marginal income tax rate in California is 12.3% on people married filing jointly for income earned above $1.25 million, so $1,250,000. In addition, income over $1 million is taxed 1% to fund mental health programs. If Prop 30 passes, the rate will be 15.05% for each dollar above $2 million in income. This rate is higher than that of other states in the U.S. Increasing income tax revenue could cause the state to reach its spending limits, called the GAN limit, which would mean that mandated expenditures from Prop 30 would require cutbacks in expenditures in other areas. And within the context of seeking to reduce emissions, there are two major types of particulate matter emissions: exhaust emissions and non-exhaust emissions. Per the California Air Resources Board, with increasingly stringent standards for exhaust emissions, the non-exhaust fraction has become increasingly important. Okay. The next tab is the monies. No, you'll have to go back one. Okay, so here's the money. Yes is $47 million, no is $16 million, and those who vote, who are supporting for yes, Lyft has provided the substantial portion at $45 million. If you can scroll up, you have to use the screen. Grab the screen and move, just touch the screen and push up. Oh, that's okay, there you go. Oh, not too far, go back. Oh, go up, there you are. Okay, so we have the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Zinc Collective, California State Association of Electrical Workers, Rocky Mountain Institute, some individuals, and there's California Environmental Voters. So they signed on to the proposition and were a top 10 contributor. Those who are against it are all individuals and the California Teachers Association, Sierra Pacific Industries, looks like. All right, thank you.
Do you know why the Teachers Association?
Yes, I do know. He does not support Prop 30.
So why don't the teachers support?
Because the funding takes money away from others.
All right, I'm going to cover Proposition 31, which is a referendum. So the subject of this is implementation or repeal of a law prohibiting the sale of certain flavored tobacco products. So the background on this is that in 2020, the California legislature passed a bill, SB 793, banning the sale of certain flavored tobacco products such as cigarettes, e-cigarettes, chewing tobacco, and snuff. Exceptions were made for premium handmade cigars, loose-leaf tobacco, and tobacco used for hookahs. Tobacco companies immediately began the process of collecting signatures on a referendum to block SB 793 from taking effect. The measure qualified for the ballot, and therefore SB 793 is currently on hold, awaiting the results of this vote. Proposition 31 asks California voters if they want SB 793 to go into effect. So the question is, should SB 793, the law banning the sale of most flavored tobacco products in California, be allowed to take effect? A yes vote approves, and a no vote rejects the SB 793 bill. If it passes, Proposition 31 would ban the sale of flavored tobacco products and allow the state's new law to go into effect. Flavored tobacco products would no longer be sold at gas stations, grocery stores, vending machines, and other places, and a $250 penalty per violation will be added for store and vending machine owners who break this law. The fiscal impact of this is that last year's state tobacco taxes raised about $2 billion. These funds are largely used for health care programs, including Medi-Cal tobacco control efforts and early childhood development. Overall, the impact of SB 793 would decrease state tobacco tax revenues, and the amount would be ranging from tens of millions of dollars annually to $100 million annually. And the wide-ranging estimate is because the response by tobacco consumers is uncertain. They might buy other forms of legal tobacco, in which case the revenue won't decrease that much, or they might not buy tobacco anymore, in which case the impact will be larger. On the other hand, if they reduce their tobacco intake, that decreases the need for treatment of tobacco-related illness. But it could also increase lifespan, leading to more health care costs in the long run. I mean, none of us escape, right? So state tobacco tax revenues. It turns out, as I said, last year the state's tobacco taxes raised about $2 billion. Of that, about 56% went to health care. And the rest went to early childhood programs, tobacco control, and a few other little things. Tobacco taxes are one of the main funding sources for Medi-Cal, as I said. And tobacco taxes also fund tobacco control efforts such as preventing tobacco sales to youth. So, supporters. The supporters say Big Tobacco uses candy-flavored products to target kids, including cotton candy, chocolate, strawberry, and minty menthol, specifically to target kids who are drawn to these sweet-flavored tobacco products. Today, over 2 million middle and high school students nationwide are using e-cigarettes. In California, almost all high school e-cigarettes users prefer flavored products. 80% of kids who smoke start by using those flavored products because the flavors hide the taste of the nicotine hit. And of course, nicotine is very addictive, and the result is that flavored tobacco can quite likely cause a lifelong addiction. Tobacco companies use candied flavors to hide strong hits of nicotine, a highly addictive drug that is especially dangerous for kids, harming their brain development and impacting their attention, mood, and impulse control. Proposition 31 will help decrease smoking rates, especially amongst youth, And it protects our youth by ending the sale of these candy-flavored tobacco products that lures them into this lifelong addiction. And in addition, Proposition 31 prevents big tobacco from causing more harm to black communities who are known to buy minty menthol-flavored tobacco. Big tobacco has been preying on black neighborhoods, spending billions of dollars to lobby, advertise, and market minty menthol cigarettes, the original candy-flavored cigarette. In the 1950s, fewer than 10% of black Americans who smoked used minty menthols, but today, 85% do. Tobacco is the #1 preventable cause of death in California, with tobacco-related diseases killing 40,000 people annually. Smoking kills more people than alcohol, AIDS, car accidents, illegal drugs, murders, and suicide combined. Of all the kids who become new smokers each year, almost a third will ultimately die from it. That's what the supporters say. Opponents say it's already illegal to sell any tobacco products to anybody under 21. Proposition 31 is simply prohibition of tobacco sales to adults. Adults who choose to use flavored tobacco products will no longer have a choice as to what products they buy. Opponents also say that Proposition 31 will drive more tobacco sales into the illegal market that already exists. Almost half of all cigarettes in California are already sold in the underground market, smuggled in from other states or countries like China and Mexico. Proposition 31 will drive even more sales underground from licensed neighborhood retailers to gangs and organized crime. People will buy flavored tobacco products illegally, taking money away from local businesses. Another objection, Proposition 31 goes too far in banning some products the FDA actually allows, which will cause people to buy other products that are more harmful. Prohibition doesn't work, they argue, has never worked, and SB 793 provides no additional funds for law enforcement on top of that. SB 793 would primarily impact minority neighborhoods due to increased criminal activity from underground markets of flavored tobacco products, which are favored in those areas. By the way, none of these pros or cons have been fact-checked, so I can't prove anything. Proposition 31 will lead to significant revenue losses that will exceed $1 billion in the next 4 years. That means less money for healthcare, education, programs for seniors, and law enforcement. Proposition 31 bans flavored, FDA-authorized, reduce-harm products and could increase cigarette use among young people as an alternative. Public education is more effective than legislation. With California's aggressive public education campaign, youth vaping in California is already down 59% in the last 3 years. So, who are the supporters? The supporters are mostly healthcare advocacy groups, including 41 organizations. I mean, the list is long, from Acacia Family Medical Group, American Academy of Pediatrics, American Heart Association, American Lung Association, American Nurses Association, Blue Shield, also the California Democratic Party, California Medical Association, California National Organization for Women, California State PTA, and a bunch of other organizations. Opponents are mainly big tobacco. R.J. Reynolds and American Snuff have done most of the funding for this, and a few other sources, a few chambers of commerce, and the Republican Party of San Diego County and the California Republican Party. I do not know why, but that's who's against it. And the major contributors have funded $17.4 million to pass this against $2.3 million against it. Major contributors for include Michael Bloomberg, who's put over $15 million into this, Kaiser Permanente, who's put over $1 million into it, and other associations who've put between $100,000 and $250,000 into it Oh, plus the California Dental Association that's put 50,000. The 2.3 million, Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris Inc., USA Inc., have been the major funders against. So in summary, the ban prohibits stores and vending machines from selling flavored tobacco products, including flavored cigarettes, e-cigarettes, pods for vape pens, tank-based systems, and chewing tobacco. The law does not affect premium handmade cigars, loose-leaf tobacco, and hookah tobacco. The law was intended to keep flavored tobacco away from kids and teens who report in high numbers that they often started smoking with a flavored product before becoming addicted. 6,800 California kids become smokers each year, and 80% of kids who use tobacco are said to have started with a flavored product. The implication being that if they hadn't started with a flavored product, they wouldn't be now smokers. According to Tobacco Free Kids, youth smokers 12 to 17 use menthol cigarettes more than other age groups. Besides kids, minority communities are also particularly affected by this ban because they go for the mint cigarette products. Some African American groups say the tobacco industry has targeted their community for decades. Proponents include Kaiser, American Heart Association, American Cancer Society, American Lung Association. Advocates of the law also say it will help lower smoking rates, especially among people of color who experience higher rates of smoking-related illnesses, and they argue that with this ban, medical care costs resulting from smoking-related disease will be decreased. The amount of savings is, of course, uncertain. Opponents include Big Tobacco, who argue that the laws against selling to minors are already in effect, that making the sales of these products illegal will drive an increase in illegal trade in the products, benefiting criminal gangs, and they argue that prohibition never works. This ban could decrease tax revenues by tens to $100 million, and the loss of such tobacco revenue will affect health education program funding. So, again, a yes means that you want the ban to go into effect. A no means you want the ban to be removed from the books. That's it.
All right, so I have one card, two questions about Prop 30. Can you explain why Lyft is so interested in Prop 30? Prop 30, Lyft and Uber are required to get 90% of their fleet to be electric vehicles by a certain date, and I mentioned that. And so trying to figure out how to get there, Prop 30 is one way, is to tax people who make over $2 million to try to figure out how to get some of that money to buy some of those vehicles.
Did you by any chance hear how many people that affects who make $2 million?
Yeah, it's 0.2% of California residents.
I heard it was 35,000 people total.
2.2% of California residents make over $2 million a year. The other question is, no proof households will benefit. Please explain in lower cost cars. So I think one of the things that was mentioned is that the supporters and opponents make arguments and may not be able to back those arguments. This particular argument was, let me find it. There's no guarantee that Prop 30 will make ZEVs affordable for most California families. So there's already a certain amount of money the state's putting forth, like we've had before, into rebates to make sure that people can try to buy vehicles. What we found is that it's not making those affordable to people who make less money, right? Most of the time it's upper middle class or higher class families that are then able to afford those, or maybe not quite afford them, but buy them anyway. So it isn't going to bring down the costs of those vehicles. It is going to make more money available for those rebates so that potentially more people can buy them. But whether it will be, I mean, the bill does state that half the money is going to go to low-income communities that is meant for the ZEVs. So I'm not sure.
Well, it could bring down the price. Because the more of those vehicles that are able to be sold, typically the price starts to come down.
That's possible. That is already happening.
This would
And I mean,
increase it.
part of the thing that the state is doing is already making car dealers sell more percentage of electric cars in their inventory. So it's up to 16%, but it's going to be, they have to get to 30%, then they have to get to 68%, and then eventually 100%.
Of course, those who are in the know say that the real solution is public transportation and alternatives entirely.
Yes. So actually, what didn't get included in this, but I thought was interesting, is that ZEVs technically include electric bikes, and they include infrastructure that means potentially using some of this money on adding bike lanes. So some of that money could be used.
I'd love to know what Torrance voters think about that.
All right, so now we're going to move on to LA, Measure A. We do not have a slide for Measure LA, so my apologies in advance. Okay. The question asked by County Measure A is, should the LA County Board of Supervisors be authorized to remove a sheriff from office for cause by a 4/5 vote after written notice and an opportunity to be heard? For cause is defined as 1, violation of a law related to the sheriff's duties, 2, flagrant or repeated neglect of sheriff's duties, 3, misappropriation of public funds or properties, 4, willful falsification of documents, 5, obstruction of an investigation into the sheriff's or the department's conduct. The background is, the LA County Sheriff leads one of the largest law enforcement agencies in the U.S. The LA County Board of Supervisors has recently expressed concern over a lack of accountability and transparency in the Sheriff's Department. In 2016, the board implemented a Sheriff Civilian Oversight Commission, whose charter is to improve public transparency and accountability with respect to the department. In March of 2020, voters approved Los Angeles County Measure R, which authorized the Sheriff Civilian Oversight Commission to develop a plan designed to reduce jail population and incarceration, and granting the commission subpoena power to investigate complaints. There has been resistance to the commission's oversight by current and previous sheriffs. The California Constitution allows a county charter to provide for the terms and removal of any elected or appointed county officer. What the charter amendment says: Measure A would amend the charter of the County of Los Angeles to allow the Board of Supervisors to remove a sheriff from office for cause. The action would require a 4/5 vote by the board, and the sheriff would have to be given written notice and an opportunity to be heard. Fiscal impact would be negligible. Supporters include LA County Supervisors Sheila Kuhl, Hilda Solis, Holly Mitchell, and Janice Hahn. Holly Mitchell writes, "The issue of sheriff accountability before us is both urgent and systemic, having impacted past generations of Angelinos, but also with important consequences for the future. Unfortunately, the county has had long and troubling history with sheriff oversight and transparency." Opponents include LA County Supervisor Catherine Barger and LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva. Catherine Barger writes, "Giving the Board of Supervisors authority to remove an elected sheriff and unequivocally takes away power from the public. It's a move that has the potential to disenfranchise voters. It also overlooks the fact that a recall process already exists to remove elected officials who fail to perform their duties." Sheriff Villanueva writes, "This motion is a recipe for public corruption, particularly when cause remains so broad and undefined. Allowing political appointees with an agenda to determine cause is fundamentally flawed." A yes vote on County Measure A would support allowing the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors by a 4/5 vote to remove the sheriff from office for cause, which is defined to include violation of laws related to the sheriff's duties, repeated neglect of the sheriff's duties, misusing public funds or properties, willful falsification of documents, or obstruction of an investigation into the department's conduct. A no vote on County Measure A would oppose allowing the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors by a 4/5 vote to remove the sheriff from office for cause.
Okay, our second county measure and the last item we're going to bring up tonight is County Measure C, general tax on cannabis businesses in unincorporated Los Angeles County. Shall the measure enacting a tax in the unincorporated areas of Los Angeles County on cannabis businesses at annual rates not to exceed $10 per square foot for cultivation, adjusted for inflation, and a percentage of gross receipts of various cannabis businesses, including retail, 6%, testing laboratory, 2%, distribution, 3%, manufacturing, and for all other cannabis businesses, 4%, generating approximately $10,360,000 to $15,170,000 annually until ended by voters, be adopted. So the situation right now is that though the permitting of cannabis cultivation is planned to begin in July of 2023, at present, cannabis businesses are prohibited in the unincorporated parts of Los Angeles. However, there's already illegal cultivation and sale of cannabis products taking place. Many cities within the county have established licensing and tax rates for cannabis businesses within their boundaries. So what's the proposal? The proposal, the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, in a 4/5 vote, 4 out of 5, directed the Office of Cannabis Management to develop and implement an equitable, sustainability-driven cannabis licensing program in unincorporated LA County. The measure would enable the county to tax upcoming cannabis businesses in accordance with the proposed tax rates. They would have a general tax on cannabis business activities, including cultivating, selling, processing, distributing, or testing cannabis or cannabis products in these unincorporated areas. Personal cannabis cultivation would be exempt from this tax. The cannabis licensing program would allow for up to 25 storefront retail cannabis businesses, 25 delivery retail businesses, 10 indoor mixed light cultivation establishments, 10 manufacturing businesses, 10 distributing facilities, and 10 testing laboratories. Outdoor cultivation of cannabis would not be permitted, and illegal growing and distribution sales of cannabis products will be subject to these tax provisions in order to allow prosecution for tax evasions. It's one of the ways of going after illegal cannabis growing. The proposed tax rates would become effective in July of 2023 following a simple majority vote, including all those registered in Los Angeles County, whether you're in unincorporated or incorporated areas, and provides for future adjustable rates. Beginning July 2026 until repealed by the voters, the measure authorizes the board to adjust the tax to a rate less than or equal to the maximum annual rate. So there's a whole list of how they have to do this. Beginning July 2027, the maximum annual tax rate for cultivation would be adjusted for inflation. The payment of the tax does not authorize illegal or unlawful cannabis business activities. However, as I said, the tax will be applied to illegal cannabis businesses. If approved, revenue derived from the tax will be deposited into the county's general fund, and the revenue from the tax is projected to be from $10.3 million to $15.2 million annually. Arguments for this. The supporters say that this law would promote the distribution and consumption of safe and unadulterated cannabis through a legal regulated market. Low starting tax rates are strategically designed to ensure the viability of the legal market, and tax revenue is redistributed to all Los Angeles County residents through the general fund, through projects of the general fund. Measure C will allow the county to impose a tax on these businesses, and the proposed initial tax rates of this measure are low. As I said, it's projected to generate approximately $10 million in annual revenue, which goes to the county's general fund. The support for this includes workforce and economic development programs, reinvestment in communities disproportionately impacted by historical and current cannabis policies, enforcement and compliance programs to combat the proliferation of untested and unsafe cannabis, mitigation of adverse environmental effects, and more. The arguments against: cannabis business tax rates for incorporated Los Angeles County are classified and measured differently from these, prompting considerations of fairness. There's a possibility the tax rates are effectively lowered by failing to adjust for inflation sooner than 2027. And because so few licensing permits will be granted, the illicit cannabis market might continue to exist for years to come. Also, this is a permanent tax, likely forever increasing. And also, the medicinal use of cannabis is not exempt from these taxes. Supporters include a number of people who represent Department of Consumer and Business Affairs, Asian Americans for Cannabis Education, United Cannabis Business Association, Green Believers Project, and California Cannabis Industry Association. The opponents seem to be primarily the Libertarian Party. So the summary is the questions whether to put a tax on cannabis businesses in the unincorporated areas of the county. The measure bridges gaps in regulation and would go into effect in July 2023 and will apply to illegal as well as legal cannabis businesses. Other localities, such as the city of Los Angeles, have similar laws already in place. The opposition maintains that such taxes will just drive consumers to illegal cannabis businesses where the product is cheaper. But proponents hope that this law will function as another local regulation and enforcement tool to go after illegal nurseries and to generate tax revenues at the same time. There is a major crisis already going on in Northern California, where illegal nurseries have driven out legal ones and endangered the local population, and state enforcement seems under-effective. So this is a move to create more local enforcement tools. Voting yes on Measure C will implement a county tax on legal and illegal cannabis businesses, and voting no on this measure will mean no implementation of such a tax.
All right, so that concludes our forum tonight, propositions, pros and cons. Please go to votersedge.org for any additional information you want to look at for the props. The monies are updated every day as to who's continuing to give money to those campaigns. You can see who's for and against and how much they're proposing. And please consider joining the League. We need as many people as we can get. We have some really important work to do. We'd love to have you join us. Men and women. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I should say men and women and anyone.